So our next topic is a roundtable. So we would like to share or discuss experiences of administrative staff in onboarding and support of Ukrainian students at the 3 partner universities, which, well, I think that's, it kind of connects to what has been said already during at the end of the last session. So, well, we are having basically 2 speakers today because unfortunately our colleague from KTH Stockholm isn't able to join us today.
Okay, I introduce my presentation with 4 main topics. First, a brief explanation about the UPM context. Second, refugee students formalities. Third, limitation and drawbacks. And finally, solutions and next steps. In the context of our university, the refugee situations begins with their incorporation. They are received by the Refugee Supporting Office at UPM from several government associations. The support office analyzes the situations of each student and assigns them to the most convenient faculty according to their academic curriculum. After, the refugee students are enrolled as Erasmus, but there are some differences with them. Language barriers, the list of subjects in English come from different bachelor's degree for international students. And official documentation is not always available. When the students are enrolled in our degrees, we check their inclusion. Currently, refugees at UPM are coming from Venezuela, Ukraine, and Syria, the last one with PhD students. When the faculties received the refugee students, we analyze their documentation in order to identify the current academic situation and provide them the enrollment to the accurate bachelor. Using interviews, we identify their languages, skills, and their familiar situation. Then we try to resolve as soon as possible the administrative procedures for their inclusion into their classes and the term. Sadly, we have limitations and drawbacks. Language skills, for example, some refugee students have lower English and non-Spanish level. Many bachelor courses at UPM are taught in Spanish, and international mobility courses are taught in English, but these courses are not necessarily part of the same bachelor curriculum. Lack documentations. Students are not able to provide their academic documentation from their home universities. This is a drawback because cannot enroll directly into UPM Bachelor. Lack of Spanish processes from government to face documentation problems since we don't have the same evaluating mechanisms for refugee students, exams, interviews to determine the academic level as other European countries have. A solution, we have identified the following phases or the following initiatives. Enroll the refugee students into a Spanish intensive course, provide them the position of Erasmus Plus student, include the students into pre-university course, offer them the economic support for this program and UPM initiatives, enroll the students to some subjects they have been coursed at their home universities in order to achieve Spanish language skills. Include them into tuition and mentoring programs because it's necessary to a good inclusion in our bachelors. I think is a brief summary about our experience. Catherine,
Yeah, thank you very much. That was
okay,
really quick, but I think we can take up some of the points you already mentioned in the discussion later. Yeah, so then maybe let's move on to Juliana and listen.
Yeah, as Katharina said, my name is Juliane Merching. I'm also working at TU Berlin in the Academic Advising Service. And for those of you who already participated last week, maybe some of the things that I will tell you now, you remember from last week. I was also thinking that it would be helpful to give you a brief overview about how we work here at TU Berlin and in the Academic Advising Service, and what offers we provide, especially for students with the refugee experience. And then we have also prepared a couple of numbers about, from last year, from 2022, with a special focus on Ukraine. And then maybe in the discussion, we can focus more specifically on our experience with Ukraine. But first, I will give you a brief overview generally. So, as I said, we are working in the Academic Advising Service at TU Berlin. That's part of the Student Services Department. There is also the admissions team and other teams working in the Student Services Department. What we do at the Academic Advising Service, and this doesn't include only refugees, but also generally prospective students and students, but more specifically, in terms of advising refugee students, we get a lot of questions and cases that deal with the admission requirements, questions about the application, and more generally about access to the university. And of course, it's more complex talking about refugees than if we compare it to the situation of a person that just finished high school in Germany and has all their documents. What we also do in the Academic Advising Service is we provide orientation in the German educational system. This is always a very important part of our advising sessions because the educational systems are so different, even, comparing it in the European perspective. It makes a big difference. So that's a big part, and we get asked questions a lot about that. And what we also do is we advise prospective students about how to choose a suitable degree program at TU Berlin. Then we also do a lot of advising in terms of recognition of degrees and previous educational qualifications. There we also have a specific office that's not part of the academic advising. I will refer to that later. It's TU Berlin's recognition office, and there is also some experts working there, but generally we also advise on that. And then we are also contact persons when it comes to difficulties during studies or during exams. And we also have questions when it comes to personal and or psychological challenges. And for that, we also have the psychological counseling and the advising service for students with disabilities and chronic illnesses that are part of the student services, and where we can directly connect prospective students or students that we are talking to if we realize that, it needs to go deeper, or that there is other priorities at the moment than purely academic advising. And then what we also get asked a lot, and this is also something particularly important for students with the background with the refugee background, is social and financial and legal questions. For instance, about housing or how financing studies can work here in Germany, and also questions related to the legal status. This comes up a lot. As I said, we are always the first point of contact, and we can do a lot of advising, but sometimes we also realize that a more expert or specialist knowledge is required. And Then we also know whom to connect and direct refugee students to. This refers both to internal and external actors. As I mentioned already at TU Berlin, it's, for instance, TU Berlin's recognition office or the international admissions team, the preparatory school, or the modern language center, for instance. And when it comes to external actors, we refer a lot when it comes to legal questions. For instance, there's the Refugee Law Clinic. And for questions related to housing or financing, there is the Studierendenwerk that we can refer prospective students to. What do we offer at TU Berlin, especially for refugee students? We have the guest student program that Katharina and I have mentioned already. It's called Into TU Berlin. And it's basically directed at students who had to flee their country of residence or their country of origin and who had to interrupt their studies, and who do not yet meet all the admission requirements to take up a regular degree program. So it's kind of a bridging offer. And what does it include? It includes the possibility to attend classes and in some cases even to take exams. That's pretty much up to the individual situation. It also needs to be agreed upon with the professor, but there is this possibility, and then these exams could potentially also be recognized later on once the student is officially enrolled. It provides the opportunity to reconnect with the academic community and with the specific field of studies. And it's also a really good opportunity to getting to know the contact persons at the department, but also to mingle with other students and to kind of, yeah, as I said, reconnect with the academic community. If you participate in the guest student program into TU Berlin, you also profit from TU Berlin's infrastructure. That means you can use the library, IT services, and so on. And what we also do as part of the guest student program is that we have an online orientation course and we have regular information sessions throughout the semester. And we kind of discuss topics such as Germany's educational system, or we offer an information session about how applying for a regular degree program works, these kind of things. So yeah, it's quite a broad offer, and it's very helpful for students that, for instance, at the moment are busy sorting out their social and legal questions, or that have to still learn German language, these kind of situations. And finally, as I said in the beginning, I also wanted to give you a few facts and figures about our work in 2022. So as you can see, there is a number of general advising sessions with students with a refugee background. It adds up to 673 that we had in the academic advising service. And then we also had a lot of emails from students with a refugee background. Roughly, it was about 3,000. And then we also have a number about emails specifically from students from Ukraine. In our Into Berlin mailbox, it was about 1,600 emails. So that was quite a high number. And then I have also prepared the number of participants in the guest student program at TU Berlin that have, let's say, Ukraine background, because it includes not only Ukrainian nationals, but also the so-called third country nationals. As you can see, it's in summer semester 2022, which started in April last year. It was 14 Ukrainians and 6 third country nationals. And now this winter semester, which started in October and is still ongoing, it was also 14 Ukrainians and 1 third country national that took part in our Into TU Berlin program, and that are like guest students now at TU Berlin, taking courses, or some of them just attending our info sessions and using the library and the IT services. Yeah, that would be it from my side for now. I will stop the screen share.
There has already been 2 questions in the chat. Eva, I've seen them. We will talk about them in a minute. Maybe also from my understanding, I have 1 or 2 questions I would like to ask you first. So first of all, we are having here, I think, 2 very different perspectives. Like Juliana is more from the central office. I think what we do in the academic advising service can be compared to what the refugee office at UPM does, because you explained, Sandra, that there's also a central office at UPM receiving international or refugee students, and I'm sorting things out with them and then finding a suitable degree program, or also the faculty maybe. And as a next step, people get in touch with you if it's clear that they are interested in computer science or that they have a background in that field. So I think it's kind of similar to what we do. We also, as a next step, would refer people to their faculties to also have a closer look at the contents of their studies and what their backgrounds are, and also maybe what's the point where they could re-enter the universities. So I think it's kind of very different perspectives, but still comparable, maybe how we do it. I would be interested in, first of all, you said, Sandra, that if it turns out that your faculty is the right place for people, you said that they are enrolled as Erasmus students. What does that mean exactly? So is it for 1 or 2 semesters? Can they earn a degree at the end? So what's the concept of this Erasmus thing? Maybe you can explain a bit more detailed.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. In our case, is the way in which I can enroll the students, because, for example, the refugee students can take the position of Erasmus student. This means she or he can choose subjects from the English list subjects, and we can enroll on these subjects. This is the first point, or the most important step to after we can enroll like a national student. This is in Spanish, we say curso puente, or it's like a pre-intermediate course to achieve the national position of a CC or UPM student.
Okay, so that means it's maybe also very similar to what we do with the guest student program. That means you enroll people as an Erasmus student so that they have access to the courses you offer at your faculty, but the long-term aim is to get them into the regular degree programs to earn a degree finally. Okay, yeah, maybe Juliana, you can also say a few words more, like regarding the guest student thing, like how do we do it in terms of administration? Like what does that mean, being a guest student?
Yeah, maybe I can tell you a little bit about the process, also how it works. Katharina already mentioned. So being a guest student in the Into TU Berlin guest student program doesn't mean that you are a regular student, but it means that you can use some of the services that TU Berlin provides, such as the library and other things, but you are not officially enrolled. You get a certificate of participation, but that's basically it, like formally. And how we do it, like process-wise, is that usually students or prospective students, they come to us in the academic advising service first. They talk to us either in person, or they send us an email, or they visit our online office hours. So we are pretty reachable. And then we have a first conversation about what's their situation like, basically, what's their educational qualification, what's their plan, midterm, short-term, long-term. And then we try to see how to connect them best to the contact persons at the faculty. This is something that Katharina has already mentioned. That's quite similar to your situation, Sandra. And then they go and talk to the course guidance or to the contact person in charge at the faculty. And they also see, like, does it match subject specific wise? They have more subject specific conversations than we can offer at the general academic advising. And they also help with kind of choosing modules, checking, like, what do the students bring and where are they best suited, like which courses are suitable and these kind of things. And that's also very helpful long-term, because then they already have been in touch with somebody at the department, at the faculty, at the degree program. And they can turn to that course guidance not only once in this initial step, but usually throughout the semester, or if they do it more than one semester, then of course also the other semesters. Yeah, and I mean, we at the Academic Advising Service, we do all this registration stuff. We take care for the IT account, for this participation certificate and these kind of things. And we are there for all the general questions that I have also mentioned before, like this social questions, legal questions, and we see how we can help, but also how we can direct the students further if it's more specific. Because oftentimes, of course, the aim or the idea is that prospective students would like to continue their education as soon as possible. But oftentimes there is also a lot of pressure, especially in terms of these social legal questions. So yeah, we are basically there for all the questions, and then we see what we can do, and what we can't do, we try to help further in directing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you already mentioned, I guess, some of the hurdles refugee students face. That's one point I would like to talk about also before we go into the questions from the audience. Like, what would you say? You mentioned a lot of things already. What would you say are the main obstacles and main hurdles for refugee students from your experience when entering your institutions? And maybe also, because we would like to talk about Ukraine a bit, do you see any differences or any special needs or hurdles for students with a Ukrainian background? So it's because I understand that the things you offer already existed before the war in Ukraine. So do you see that what are the main hurdles in general, and what would you say, is there any differences or any special needs for students coming from Ukraine?
In our case, we found several differences. The first one, I don't know what is the word, for example, the specific curriculum of the students. Because in our experience, the curriculum or the documentation is very different. For example, the transcript of records for the Ukrainian students at the hours. In this case, for us, it was very difficult to identify the corresponding subjects in this case. Because, for example, our students have many subjects like pre-intermediate or pre-university course. In this case, was difficult to identify the corresponding and also the specific bachelor for enroll the students. This is one point. The other point was the problems with translation of the documentation in any case. We lack we like because in our staff we have a Ukrainian professor, and he help us to translate, to read the documentation, but this is a problem. Other problem is the cultural difference, because in our case, in our faculty, the relationship between a professor and a student is very close. The students are able to ask, are able to go to the tuitions and mentoring programs, and we identify the cultural or their Ukrainian system is more different in this case. And we try to talk with our refugee students to try to understand, they can understand the possibility to offer this close to their professors, to break this barrier, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so recognition always is an issue, I guess. That's I think that should be the same at TU Berlin as well. Also, maybe the culture of learning and teaching is a bit different. I think that's an experience we've had with other international students as well. Is there anything else, Juliane, you would like to mention?
What I found very specific to the Ukrainian situation was, in comparison to, let's say, previous situations with refugee students, is that many students continue to study online in Ukraine, while at the same time also trying to create a plan B here in Germany. So this is something very specific to the situation, I would say. Then the language barrier, of course, I think we have already mentioned it. It's something that was the same also now in the Ukrainian context. At TU Berlin, all bachelors, for instance, are taught in German. So that's basically also one of the main hurdles that many prospective students were facing. So it's the same for students from Ukraine. And then also very specific to the experience of last year when the war in Ukraine started, was what I found especially challenging, the situation of third country nationals, because it was for a couple of months very unclear to them what their perspective would be in terms of legal status and in terms of, you know, making plans in terms of also social questions. So this is something that I also would say was very specific to that situation, and that we got asked a lot, and that we had a lot of advising sessions dealing with topics like that. So a lot of pressure. Yeah, and I think at TU Berlin, we were kind of lucky because we already had the program that existed. So we didn't really need to invent anything from scratch. It was, you know, there, and we could build on everything that was already there. So that was great in that context.
Thank you. Yeah, now I would like to take up some of the questions from the audience. I mean, we still have 8 minutes. I think we could talk on for ages. I would, yeah, I would try to find some of the questions which are interesting for everybody. Maybe one thing somebody asked about the language of instruction at TU Berlin. Juliane mentioned that already. So I think it's similar also to what UPM offers. the bachelor's programs and most of the programs at TU Berlin are being taught in German. So it's the equivalence, I think, done to most of the programs being taught in Spanish at UPM. We have a couple of English master's programs, but on the bachelor's level, like mostly everything is being taught in German. And this also applies for the guest student program, because there's no special courses being offered for guest students. It's the regular courses from the bachelor's and the master's programs. So most of it will be in German, some courses being in English, and then it really depends on the individual background, what somebody can do or what makes sense. Okay, let me go through the other questions. Somebody was asking about recognition. I think this is a topic itself. We could have a whole webinar which is more than 2 hours just regarding recognition. So we've had in this IncluStem webinar series, we've had something which was dealing with recognition, and there we explained in detail also how it works in the different countries. Maybe Susanna, you can share it in the Moodle platform later, because this is really a big thing. So what we've heard from the two of you is that it happens that there is incomplete documentation of the educational background of the academic achievements. Maybe you can say 1 or 2 sentences. What happens if this is the case? If you don't have any proof or not enough proof, how do you deal with it?
In our case, is the lack of documentation, because I think, for example, in our faculty in computer science, is easy to find an equivalence between 2 syllables. But the problem is the students are not able to provide the specific documentation talking about the contents of the subject. And we have any other mechanism to do this, o sea, to break this wall. In this case, we consider try to involve to students in some subjects, in some course, in order to identify the level of these students on this matter. I think is the more easy way to solution this problem.
Yeah, I can also say a few words about how it generally works. And then, as always, it's a very individual solution that is found in the end. So basically, there is an official guideline how to deal with cases of missing documents in Germany, and then it's up to the university how they kind of implement it. So what we do is we generally check the legal requirement, the legal status, I would say. And then we, of course, talk to the person and see whether this educational biography kind of makes sense, let's say. And then there is some individual solution how this person can prove it, like take an exam at the preparatory school, for instance, or maybe find an arrangement with the degree program or something like that. So these are the kind of 3 main points that somebody needs to fulfill, and then it's always very individual. This was just a general overview about how it is done. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's one more question or one more topic somebody brought up. I would like to talk about with you. There was a question saying, how do you deal with guest students' expectations? So it was a question for you, Jana, but I think it's interesting also to hear your perspective, Sandra. So because the person is assuming that not all students who are taking the pre-university course are going to be studying in the university in the future. So do you consider reorientation to other educational opportunities, or do most of the students who take part in the guest student program finally enroll at the university? So maybe this is a question for you, Juliane, but also I would like Sandra to add your perspective to that topic afterwards.
Okay, I can start. Well, generally, of course, it's a really good question, because we have to deal with expectation management a lot, and also with, you know, all these other determining factors that, of course, have a big influence on what the prospective students decides in the end. And that's also one main thing to keep in mind, that we kind of advise on the offers that we have or that are. I mean, we also advise on other study options, or we also can say a few words about how taking up vocational training works in Germany. But that in the end, it is the student that has to make the decision, and that, you know, we can just show options and kind of try to take off a little bit of the pressure that many students also feel. And maybe taking up studies is not always the best opportunity. Maybe TU Berlin is not always the most suitable options, So it really depends. So yeah, we realize that there is always very high expectations, and what I also mentioned earlier, to really continue as soon as possible, and, you know, to be in a hurry and to get a degree. But yeah, there's so many other factors that, yeah, there's also many different options, and in the end, it's up to the student. And all we can do is show the options, I would say.
In our experience, up to my knowledge, our refugee students prefer continue their education with us. In this case, is we don't think what is the situation when our students prefers continue their education in other institution or in another bachelor or degree or other education systems. But I consider that, for example, we courses with subjects are very transversal or important into the education now. For example, computer science, programming, other things and other matters are important to any students in the world. In this case, I think in any case, the education and the opportunities is better for each refugee students on our university.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. There's so many questions still in the chat, but unfortunately the time is up. I would also have loved to talk with you about language a bit, because that's one of the main things you hear always when talking about refugees. What about the language barrier? So from our experience, yes, language is of course very important, but maybe language is also not the most important thing to talk about first sometimes, because, well, this is what we discussed also when we met before this session, that Sandra also said it's important maybe to be in touch with your faculty and with your subject, and then we find a language somehow. But yeah, we have to leave that aside maybe for now. We will try to answer some of the questions in the chat, because we still have some time maybe during the next session, but I would now, for now, close this session.
Okay, so I am here with
Katarina Jonsson-Berglund of KTH. Hello, colleague.
Hello. Thank you for thank you for having me.
Yes. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is at KTH before we jump in to talk about the Ukrainian students.
Thank you. My name is Katarina Jonsson-Berglund, and I am head of education office in KTH. I think you all know about KTH, so I won't go into that context. But in my department, we have student services, student counseling. We have the international office of KTH, and we have the admin part of studies in our admissions and degree office.
I remember when we spoke about this before, that you also have some national role for people in your position.
Yeah. We have. I'm engaged in several parts of the national administration team as well for Swedish universities, and we have a broad cooperation between the universities and university colleges, and not the least when it comes to information systems and taking sort of onboarding students and degrees and what have you. So yes, I do have that context as well. Definitely, I've been in the field for 20 years, so yeah, that's part of the deal.
And thank you for being here with us today and talking about what we all can do to help students with migration background. So when the Russian invasion of Ukraine was a fact, how did KTH act? What happened?
Well, first of all, it was a tragedy for us all, and most for our Ukrainian students and colleagues and the people of Ukraine. But also within my department, I have people from Ukraine, and also we have quite a substantial staff from Ukraine in KTH and from Russia. So it was quite an interesting situation. I got a few phone calls, people contacting me on the matter of what can KTH do, and as a government authority, there's a lot KTH cannot do. But from the crisis in Syria, we learned that we do not focus on what we cannot do. We focus on what we can do. And as for me, from my perspective, I can do something about student counseling and reaching out to Ukrainian refugees coming into Stockholm and do something for them. And the question was what, but also that we, I think it was 2 weeks into the war, we said that we have a task force in KTH for questions about the war and the situation in Ukraine.
Okay, and who was part of that task force?
It was me, myself, as part of the student admin, and then it was HR, and we had our planning head of planning, and we had a few more. I can't really remember, and then I can't really get the name of well, it was the academic at risk, or this scholars at risk. That office was included as well. So we were.
Okay, so it's quite a senior task force.
Oh, definitely,
yes.
definitely. Yeah. Senior task force, and we had authority to do something. So that was the main purpose. If you're going to be in this task force, you need to be senior and you need to have authority to actually act. So that was, that was it.
And since then, how has KTH worked with, if we start with onboarding of Ukrainian students, how many students do we have currently? How are they part of the community?
Well, what we did was actually quite early in April, we launched a a meeting, not online. It was filmed. It was on site, and it was here in KTH, and we spread it through Facebook, an event of information events, and said that, you know, we're going to talk about Swedish school system. What can you do? What can you not do? What do you need to learn, or what English proficiency do you need to have to actually get into the university? And we had a form. We spread it through Facebook, as I said, and not a big thing, but all of us that was included, we just kept sort of sharing on Facebook, and we had they had to sign up for the event, and I think we gathered about 100 people, Ukrainians, and a lot of them, they signed up and said, well, I want to hear about this. So we knew what the audience would like to hear, and most of them wanted to hear about, how do I get into the Swedish system, the university system. And some of them weren't even through what we call gymnasium in Sweden, or high school or college. But they wanted to know what was, you know, what you need to actually access university. Do you have to pay? I mean, all sorts of questions that all students actually have, no matter where you come from. And their parents wanted to know the level of KTH or the level of the Swedish system. And some of them were ongoing engineering students in Ukraine, where we knew about their university. So we could actually check on the backgrounds through our channels in Ukraine. And then we had the event. We had sort of information about the Swedish system, information about KTH, but not as much as they could talk to the study counselors. And also we had Ukrainian speaking personnel in the room. So we had 3 colleagues who actually spoke their own language, which I think was a key issue. So they were greeted by a fella, sort of, you know, and that was almost the first time they heard Ukrainian spoken in Sweden. So that was very touching to see how the reaction, and even some of them some of them were really proficient in English, and some of them were not. And then we could connect, and we could say, so we had a line to these 3 persons, and they could sort of do as long as they were sort of felt safe, their English were also much better. So it was, we provided information, a safe environment. We handed them tea, coffee, buns, and some of them we actually managed to offer a few courses as exchange students. So we ended up having 5 or 6 students from this crowd of 100. They had the sort of basic knowledge about the Swedish system, which was what they wanted. And we had about, I think it was between 5 or 10 students that we actually were able to offer courses here in KTH as incoming exchange students. So yeah, and we're on from that, and they're doing well.
Actually, yeah, that's great to see here. Yes. So I actually remember seeing the poster up for that event, and felt very proud to be a KTH employee at that point. That we did something, and we, as you said, it sounded like it was important to just provide basic information and to provide it in a local language. So that was good. So the students, you said there was a handful of students that were offered as exchange students, but after that, I'm assuming that Ukrainian students have entered the regular way. Is that right?
Exactly. So
Yes.
that was you know, from the 24th of February 2022, and that semester. And as I've, you know, you've probably heard this as well, that, you know, for refugees to get into a meaningful context quite early is a key issue to their mental health and their recovery, or the recovering. from what they've come from. So that was the main purpose for us, sort of, you know, letting people get some hope, give people some hope that, you know, this autumn you can actually get into university in Sweden, or and for these people that were ongoing engineering students, we could provide a matching context, you know, almost immediately. This turned out to be this incoming, treating them as incoming exchange students. That turned out to be sort of the Swedish way to do it, sort of. So that was enhanced by the government as well.
And now you say they're doing fine, but if I understand correctly, we actually don't know how many Ukrainian students are in the system. They have come in, you know.
Exactly. if they come in the regular way, we do not know, because we're not allowed to have nationality in our systems, which is, you know, I think is good. But, you know, for these students on spot on that time, we know who they were. Of course, we did. And then we were fortunate to actually have the opportunity to have a bit of funding from donors that provided fundings for this as a kickstart of their studies. And so we do know that there were Ukrainian students coming in the normal way, sort of, this autumn, and they turned to us and asked us, you know, can I actually take part of that as well? Because, you know, to be the finances of a refugee in Sweden, it's not much money. So so they could benefit from those donors as well. So I'm very thankful to the donors.
That's great news. So to wrap up our conversation here, what would you say are some key takeaways that other universities can maybe learn from the KTH experience?
What I want to say is, well, do not focus on what's illegal. Focus on what we can do. And if we focus on what we can do and do it with a warm heart, that takes us so far. So that's you know, the basics that I want to send out to our colleagues in Europe, definitely.
Thank you so much for being part